the sounds that you know, and these are also symbols. The thought unspoken has a sound that you do not hear, but that is very audible at another level of reality and perception. Trees as they stand are a sound that, again, you do not perceive. In your dreams, and particularly beyond those dreams that you recall, are areas of consciousness in which these sounds are automatically perceived and translated into visual images. They operate as a sort of shorthand. Given certain sounds, you could recreate your universe as you know it unconsciously, and any one multidimensional symbol can contain all the reality that you know. Physically, smell, sight, and sound are combined together to give you your main sense data and compose your physical senses. At other levels, however, these are separated. Odors therefore have a visual reality, and, as you know, visual data can also be perceived in terms of other sense perceptions. The symbols can come together or fly apart, can be perceived separately or as a unity. As each event has its own symbol for you, so you have your characteristic way of combining these. These symbols can be translated and perceived in many terms, as a series of notes for example, as a combination of senses, as a series of images. At various stages of consciousness you will perceive the symbols in different terms. The multidimensional symbol in its entirety, then, has a reality in other states of consciousness, but also at other levels of reality entirely. You operate as if your thoughts were secret, though you should know by now that they are not. Not only are your thoughts apparent through telepathic communications, for example, but without your conscious awareness they also form what you may call pseudo-images, beneath the range of physical matter as you normally perceive it in some cases, or above this same range. It is, therefore, as if your thoughts appear within other realities as objects, alive and vital in themselves, growing into other systems as flowers or trees grow up seemingly from nothing within physical reality. These can then be used as the raw material, so to speak, in certain other systems. They are the given, natural data, the raw material of creativity in the realities that you help seed but do not perceive. In this manner of speaking, your thoughts then follow laws. Their behavior follows laws, and their activities, that you do not understand, though you call your thoughts your own. They are then manipulated independently of you, by other kinds of consciousness as ever-changing natural phenomena. The native consciousness within such systems is not aware of the origin of this phenomena, nor of your own reality. They take the evidence that appears to their senses as reality, as most of you do. It would not occur to them that this phenomenon originated outside of their own system. If I were to make the same statement, for example, to any of my readers, I would be accused of saying that physical reality was composed of the discards of the universe. I am not saying that, nor implying it in the case just mentioned. In your system you have a direct hand in the formation of physical reality. Your natural given data is the result of individual, mass, and collective thoughts, feelings, and emotions, materialized. Your system in this respect is more creative than the systems just mentioned. On the other hand, within these other systems there is a strong innovative group consciousness developing, in which identity is retained but greater interplay allowed between individuals, a large creative interchange of symbol pools, a drawing upon mental and psychic symbols with greater facility. Because of this, these individuals recognize more clearly the connection between creative images and given sense data. They purposely alter and change their given sense data, and experiment with it. All of this involves a working with symbols in a most intimate manner. At certain levels of your personality you are aware of all the different ways in which symbols are used, not only in your system but in others. As mentioned earlier, no system of reality is closed. Your thoughts and images and feelings therefore alter the given sense data in some other systems. The innovative patterns developed in those systems, however, can be to some extent perceived within your own. There are constant bleed-throughs. In your various stages of consciousness you pass through areas that can be correlated with many of these systems. Some stages through which you pass are native stages to other kinds of consciousness, and while passing through these you will find yourself using symbols in the way that is characteristic of that level. Symbols should be fluid, ever-changing in their form. Some can be used as casements to house original experiences, as methods of deception therefore rather than illumination. When this happens, fear is always involved. Fear taken into the various stages of consciousness acts as a distorting lens, hiding the natural dimensions of all symbols, acting as a barrier and as an impediment to free flow. Symbols of an explosive nature serve as releasing agents, setting loose that which has been encased. Without physical storms you would all go insane. The aggressive nature of symbols is little understood, nor the relationship between aggression and creativity. These are far from opposing characteristics, and without an aggressive thrust, symbols would lack their high mobility. They would exist in a permanent kind of environment. It is both the creative and aggressive aspects of consciousness that allow it to use symbols, to move through various levels of experience, and the aggressive nature of thought that so propels it, despite your knowledge, into realities that you do not understand. Aggressiveness and passivity are both behind symbols of birth, for both are needed. They are both beneath symbols of death, though this is not understood. Inertia results when aggressiveness and creativity are not in the proper proportions, when consciousness leans too severely in one direction or another, when the flow of symbols is either too quick or too slow for the particular psychological environment in which you dwell. Pauses then occur. To put it as simply as possible, there is an almost inconceivable moment in which a no reality occurs, in which a symbol is caught between motion and no motion, a time of uncertainty. This is of course translated in many ways, and reflected. In such periods, certain symbols can be lost to all intents and purposes, dropping out of an individual's experience, leaving gaps of inertia. These gaps exist quite literally in many systems. You encounter them on many levels. You may find yourself experiencing a state of consciousness, for example, in which nothing seems to happen and no psychological landscape or recognizable symbols occur. These exist not only psychologically or psychically, but as blank areas in terms of space. The spaces may be filled finally with new symbols. If you are perceptive enough, you can sometimes catch yourselves encountering such states of reality in which nothing appears and no signs of any consciousness outside of your own is apparent. Such blank spots can be seeded with new symbols, and are often used as channels through which new creative ideas and inventions are inserted. These gaps are recognized by others, therefore, and viewed as dark spaces. They also represent areas of no resistance for those mind travelers who are probing inner realities. They represent uncluttered areas, but also open channels, inactive in themselves but passively waiting. Now some symbols also wait in such a passive manner to be activated. They represent future experience, in your terms, that presently lies latent. These blank spots of inertia, therefore, are creative to some extent, in that these other symbols may swim into view within them. Chapter 19. Alternate Presence and Multiple Focus. Let us begin with the normal waking consciousness that you know. But one step away from this is another level of consciousness into which you all slip without knowing. We will call it R1. It is adjacent to your normal consciousness, separated from it very slightly, and yet in it very definite effects can appear that are not present in your usual state. At this level many abilities may be used, and the present moment can be experienced in many different fashions, using as a basis the physical data with which you are already familiar. In your normal state you see the body. In a one your consciousness can enter the body of another, and heal it. You can in the same manner perceive the state of your own physical image. You can, according to your abilities, manipulate matter from the inside consciously, with lucidity and alertness. One may be used as a side platform, so to speak, from which you can view physical events from a clearer standpoint. Using it you are released momentarily from bodily pressures, and with that freedom, You can move to relieve them. Problems that seem beyond solution can often, though not always, be solved. Suggestions given are much more effective. It is easier to form images, and they have a greater mobility. One is a sidestep away, therefore, and yet an important one. Now it can be used as the first of a series of steps, leading to deeper states of consciousness. It can also be used as the first of a series of adjacent steps. Each of the deeper layers of consciousness can also be used as first steps leading to other adjacent levels. One is simple to enter. When you listen to music that you like, when you are indulging in an enjoyable quiet pursuit, you can sense the different feeling. It may be accompanied by your own characteristic physical clues. You may tap your fingers in a certain way. There may be a particular gesture. You may stare or look dreamily to the left or right. Any such physical clues can help you differentiate between this state of consciousness and the usual predominating one. You have only to recognize it, learn to hold it, and then proceed to experiment in its use. As a rule, it is still physically oriented, in that the abilities are usually directed toward the inner perception and manipulation of matter or physical environment. You can therefore perceive the present moment from a variety of unique standpoints not usually available. You can perceive the moment's reality as it exists.
Here we have something which has within it the potential of the infinite unfoldment of ourselves. In the leisure time
For your intestine or your hand.
Time is the time when we can be ourselves. We can do whatever we feel is right and best. We can escape from the burdens and deprivations of employment, and for a few hours every day we can really be the person we want to be. That is, of course, if there's a person we want to be. Perhaps we do not feel this need at all, so we come home, flop down in front of the television, and wait for the next ball game. This is what we do. But what does this mean in the life of the person? If this was the only life, and we're going to oblivion when it ends, it wouldn't make any difference where we spend our leisure time. It wouldn't make any difference how little discipline we assert. The disciplined and the undisciplined will lie down together in eternal forgetfulness. But if this is not it, and there seems to be quite a possibility that it isn't, then what are we really doing with time? Are we making something out of it? And I think each person should, for their own sake and the sake of their associates, sit down and carefully note the time factor to find out what they can do with time which is going to make them more able, more intelligent, more understanding than the condition they are in at the moment. How are we going to discover this? Well, one of the things that you always get thrown at you when you try to start such a conversation is that the individual is tired. They've worked. They do not want to be part of a program of further labor. They do not want to consider leisure as labor opportunity. They want to rest. They want to have fun. They want to engage in small talk and very possibly take on a little more alcohol than is good for them. So the idea of planning and disciplining leisure is for the most part resented. The person feels that he has bought the time to do exactly what he pleases. The only difficulty with this is that a dedication of this type, when carried into practice, does not seem to work. The individual does not have the happiness he hopes for. He does not find his family as understanding and cooperative as they might be. He finds the programs on TV getting worse all the time. He gets no real satisfaction out of not planning a purposed existence. Now, how do we best gain that which we lack? Those who have these problems should set them up and catalog them properly. They should ask themselves a number of very simple but direct questions as to what makes them happy, how they wish they could spend the time if they could do anything they wanted to, what they are anxious to become more than what they are, and how they are going to face a future that is going to close in on them relentlessly. There has to be something in the form of a plan to make life really valuable. And without value, life is a sort of drifting from the cradle to the grave. There is really no purpose in it. And the history of the world and the present condition of society both indicate clearly that the average person does not purpose his own existence. He depends on outside influences. He can be worked into a frenzy by a tyrant. He can buy things he can't use and doesn't need. He can demand luxuries that are not necessary, and many of them are detrimental to him. He just goes around doing what he pleases, ending sometimes in a premature grave and sometimes in an involuntary bankruptcy. Out of all this, the time is wasted. We have lost approximately 25 years of life. It's not all in one place. It is scattered through. But of a 75-year life span, only about 1/3 can be said to be available to the average person as time for himself. The other 2/3 go to work and sleep. But this third that belongs to him is a magnificent opportunity for a career. The person has a paid initiation into the best schooling. He has the right and privilege of learning almost anything he wants. And if he wishes to want only that which is best, he will find that his economic situation may improve through less ambition and less extravagance, and he can really have a very important extra life that is now lost. He can have another complete existence. Instead of being a working man for 8 hours, and then a sleeping man for 8 hours, he can also be a growing person for 8 other hours of every day, growing up into new aptitudes and opportunities. So, what are the opportunities today? Probably one of the best forms of growth that we can work with now is cooperation and service to each other. The individual finds perhaps the greatest basic joy that there is in the human composition when he brings joy or releases joy through other persons. One of the simplest things we can do is to plan a program of helpfulness, a program of not thinking about ourselves, but earning the respect, admiration, confidence, and affection of other people. It is something to look back quietly upon a good deed that has brought security to another. And this type of backward looking is probably the most cheerful as possible. So service to others. If you do not know what to do, help someone in desperate trouble. Forget being deprived of a few hours of television or being requested to turn away from some ordinary leisure that you have planned, but try to see what you can do to help other people. Now, if you have special trained abilities in these matters, there are many opportunities that open themselves to the person who really wants to help. If you have music as a background and have the abilities, find some young people who want music and cannot afford it. And instead of sitting around gossiping or answering phone calls, take these young people and try to educate them or help them in their musical lessons. If you are in business, take young people who need business training. They will not get proper training in school, but they can get it from someone who has been through it and knows what is right and knows what should occur and what should not occur. Everyone can do something, and out of the best they have done themselves, share with another. Then there are things you can do for yourself. If you are not in a position or do not feel equipped to work with other people, then work with yourself. Develop those faculties and powers which are not functioning properly today. Look over your own life and see what your mind is doing. Is your mind growing, or is it just heaping up one prejudice on top of another? Watch your thoughts and see whether or not you're instinctively criticizing things you do not understand, or have developed powerful prejudices which interfere with justice and judgment. Look over your own nature and then go to work on the problem that you find needs attention. It is not good, however, to try to simply convert yourself. To sit down and say, I shouldn't hold that attitude, is usually not very meaningful. What you really should do if you dislike a certain condition is get into that condition yourself. Move in on it and find out why people think the way they do. Instead of criticizing from some set point within yourself, find out why other people are not more successful in their judgments. I know a number of persons who have simply gone into various walks of life which are not their own in order to find out how other people really live. And it is almost certainly an eye-opener. If you do not wish to go through all this, it then is the best attitude you can have is to believe firmly that every individual is doing the best he can for what he is. And it is always important to try to estimate what he is and help him to become better. We have to sometimes study what we are and find out why it isn't satisfactory, and then start to fill in the areas where we are deficient. Nature tells us from experience that each one of us should have at least 3 and probably 4 dynamic interests. These interests are not in conflict unless we put them in conflict. Realities are never in conflict. They simply absorb more and more time, but with judgment and control they can be properly allotted. First of all,
at all. I mean, it would be so simple. No effort, no...
Everyone should have a physical
trouble, no nothing. But strangely enough, we have the strange conviction that something exists, that we're here, that we're real. And from earliest childhood, that has been an extreme puzzle to me, that just something exists at all. And I discovered the nature of the puzzle. The nature of the puzzle is that I was persuaded by my culture to translate this phenomenon into words or numbers. That I had to represent what is going on in nature in terms of the English language, the French language, the Latin language, the Greek language, and finally the Chinese language. And I found the latter the most suitable. But nevertheless, this is the puzzle. When you want to understand something, when you want to know what is it all about, what you mean is that you need a translation of what is going on into language. That's the purpose of a university. You're all here studying to translate what is going on in the physical world into words. And even when I say the physical world, that is a purely philosophical conception. It's an idea about the world, propagated largely from the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries of European scientific thought. Physical. We all know what physical is, don't we? I mean, it's material. What does the word material mean? Well, of course, it's the same word as mother, Latin mater. Greek meteor. Also meter, measure. And finally Sanskrit, matra, which also means to measure and is the root word behind maya, which is illusion. So, the physicists, finally abandoned the quest for finding out what matter is, because they found out that when they investigated matter, they had to describe it in terms of form. And they found out, they just gave it up. In other words, the idea that there was some kind of basic stuff underlying everything was nothing more than an illusion. Because the strict, precise physicist describes structure. And he finds that matter is, after all, only a matter of form. It's only the form that matters. Wowee. We've all been brought up in the common sense of the 19th century. This is the background. This is the unconscious belief system underlying most of our doctrines. And that is, we have two belief systems. First of all, the Christian or the Jewish, in which Big Daddy up the top of the sky. Now, I don't want to offend anyone, but there are probably some of you here who've studied St. Thomas Aquinas and have a very, very profound, deep conception of the Christian God. Or you may have studied Kabbalah or Hasidic Judaism, and have a very deep realization that goes beyond Big Daddy. But Big Daddy is the image which influences your emotions and your basic feelings. And so the Big Daddy thing became much too oppressive. And it was absolutely essential for very many people, especially intellectuals, to get rid of it. Because you didn't want to be supervised all the time, judged all the time, looked at all the time by somebody criticizing everything you did. So we got rid of it. Nobody really believes in it anymore. An enormous number of people think they ought to believe it, but they don't. And that's what certain theologians call the death of God. But instead of that, we supplanted Big Daddy with another image, which is just as mythological. And that was the image of the world as a mechanical phenomenon. A thing that goes tick, 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 tick in various ways. Or that is a randomness of particles or wavicles that occasionally produces order in the same way that a million monkeys, typewriting on a million typewriters for a million years, would probably at some point reproduce the Encyclopedia Britannica. But the real reason lying behind that vision of the world was a declaration of personality. That is to say, I'm the kind of fellow who doesn't believe that there's someone up there who cares. That's the little old lady. I'm a tough guy. I believe that life is at root meaningless, and I'm going to face the hard facts. Incidentally, nobody ever talks about soft facts. So I believe it's all empty, and that the only thing is that the meaning of life, of human life, consists in the heroic conflict with tragedy. We're all going to end up in the dustbin. Excuse me, the ash. And there's no future. Finally.